This is the Golf GTi Mark V. Now, it's probably, I think, one of the best Golf GTIs ever made. I own this car for 7 years. I purchased this car from brand new from the Volkswagen dealership in Dubai from mid 2007 to the end of 2014. It had an automatic DSG paddle shift gearbox. I first fell in love with the Golf GTi Mark II, which is obviously the first Mark 1 was the kind of defining hot hatchback, which kind of set the standards, and it was first kind of in the market in the UK in 1977. And later on in the 80s, the Mark II came around, and one of the neighbors had a Mark II, and I was always kind of quite drawn to it. They had a black Golf GTi Mark II with these kind of rims, which I really, really liked. And this is very similar to the one that's pictured here. That stuck in my head for a long time, and I thought, yeah, I really would like to have one of these. So that is really was the inspiration behind getting the Golf. In addition to something that was kind of comfortable, but yet could be quite sporty, and obviously something within my budget. And I wanted something that looked kind of subtle, but had like, performance under the bonnet, and this certainly had that. The particular styling of this car is based on the kind of Mark V standard Golf, but there's a few kind of subtle differences. It's slightly lowered, and I always had a feeling, and I don't think it's totally correct, but the slightly kind of rear ends had this kind of slight kind of flair to them, which I thought was quite nice. I think most sports cars have the flair to them, but I always had this feeling about that. Perhaps it was because of the lowered suspension by about 13 centimeters. The lowered suspension kind of add to that kind of more of a kind of sportier look. Obviously, the key differences of the Golf GTI are that red line, which I was drawn to. There's a small kind of discreet red line and that GTI badge, which is iconic. Then you have that honeycomb grille in the front, and the 18-inch wheels have these kind of blade-like rims, which I quite like. I haven't seen anything else like it on the road, and these rims wouldn't kind of be suited to any other car. I have seen these on some Mercedes kind of on aftermarket. It just looks odd. They were just suited to this, and they were kind of razor-like. When they're shining and chrome, were brilliant. At nighttime drives, they were just looked kind of glowing. It was just spectacular. So these are the kind of small details that I quite liked, and the fact that you could put anything in the trunk, you could fold down the seats, and these were the kind of key features that kind of made it a bit more distinguished. One of the things that I always had in my mind is whether to buy the kind of two-door coupe, or some people call it three-door because of the door in the rear, or the four-door, or some people call five-door. I personally thought that four doors is more practical, and so I think if you're getting it and you're kind of caught between the two, the performance isn't any different. I kind of researched this endlessly, and you're always, in my view, better off with four doors. You can get in lots of things as well, which I'll share kind of in part of my stories that I've had. In terms of the interior, it had these classic tartan picnic type seats, which have been durable throughout the whole 7 years that I owned it. Few kind of stains here and there for kind of spillage of drink, but otherwise easy to clean, really kind of waterproof, and the kind of tartan seats kind of give it that particular edge. Also, the kind of dashboard inside is ergonomically like perfectly designed, and it still feels really kind of modern to this day. It has this kind of black backlit kind of blue lights, which were really cool, and even on the speedometer you had this kind of red speed dials, which kind of indicate how fast you were going, and I'll tell you some stories about that as well. The seats felt quite sporty. They kind of hug your back quite well, and they were quite snug for long distance driving as well. Had a lot of kind of long distance drives, and I'm not just talking from going, say for example, from outside London to kind of Wales or something. This was really from Dubai to the ends of different Emirates in Abu Dhabi or Fujairah, and then the longest kind of stretch was going to Oman, and that was quite an interesting and fun drive. In terms of the Engine and performance, it produced just shy of 200 horsepower, which is technically just 197, which is quite a lot back then. And it produced it packed a punch for what it was. It was a 2-liter turbo 4-cylinder, and not many cars had that. 0 to 60 would be 7.2 seconds, but honestly it felt like 5 seconds, as naturally I'd floor it quite a lot, and I raced a lot of cars, which I'll tell you about. There's a lot of wheel spin as you kind of accelerate. The car was incredibly light for the performance that it's given. So one of the kind of key reasons kind of buying it was just like really that experience at 0 to 60. You'd hear, as you put it in sport, just hear the engine, and then just kind of, you could hear that kind of slight kind of the sneezing of the turbo come in, and as you kind of would accelerate once you're in sport mode, and that engine little growl. There's not much you could get. I mean, it's not a V8 or a V12, but that small little 2-liter had a little kind of singing bassy note about it, and the turbos would have a particular hissing and sneezing as you would kind of change up the gears. Even if you had it in DSG, when you change up in gears quite quickly, then you could hear it. Or if you had it in sport and you just didn't want to kind of get bothered about changing up and down gears, and this, you'd still kind of have the benefit all of that. And a lot of the time I'd kind of put it in sport, especially when I was racing. So, and I'll share some stories about that. Mechanically, it was perfectly controlled. It's kind of throttle, brake, and gearbox and steering are all kind of mechanically synced together. And just one of the best experiences I've had, with so much kind of detail. And that's probably why I'm quite drawn to German manufacturers, in particular Volkswagen, and it's just the kind of synchronization mechanically of their engineering is just perfect, really. It drove and handled beautifully. It was just so precise around corners. It was precise in straight line. It was just fantastic on kind of even on casual drives. It's not just, it wouldn't be every day that I'd be racing this car. It made me feel like a competent race driver, to the extent that I actually took up go-karting as a result, and then, started to race in go-karting, a few championships, and then obviously kind of led on to kind of driving bigger cars. It was great in cornering. You kind of, the more you kind of take it in at speed, kind of late braking, bit of kind of the front kind of would slightly kind of have some oversteer a little bit, but I thought it was good. The chassis was so balanced. And just some more small details. The Audi TT actually has the same chassis. You wouldn't believe that, but both great handling cars. But the Golf was just a perfectly kind of balanced chassis. In terms of my stories that I wanted to kind of share, my friend Mohammed, he had a 911, a Porsche 911, and we swapped cars and we raced each other in the rain in Dubai. And that was just so fantastic, going around roundabouts and then the straights. And back in the day, we didn't have any cameras where we were racing. And that was just fantastic. And that actual kind of race between me and him actually led to a painting that I did, which was my kind of first early paintings, was us racing in the rain, which was just brilliant. So that was one of my earlier experiences. Then that led to the experiences of me racing Lamborghinis, Lamborghini Murcielago in Dubai's on Jumeirah Beach Road. These local Emirati had their Murcielago, which was an orange, and I kind of wind my windows down and I said, I want to race. I put my hazards on, we're at the lights, and just obviously for a few seconds, I mean, I kept up, right? And they were looking at this car, I thought, what the hell? Because it's so light, its take up was really kind of fast, so accelerated, and then so did the kind of the V12, right? And this little kind of 2-liter car, just taking off for, I'd say, for at least 1 or 2 seconds. This kept up, and then the Lamborghini, was gone. But I think the drivers of the car were quite pleased. They kind of thumbs up, and that for me to kind of have the kind of nerve to race them. Now that was really fun. And another time on the Dubai highway, I saw a Bugatti Veyron. I thought, oh, that's fantastic. Oh, I just want to get to the back of that. I got to the back of it. I flashed the guy, and actually on the flash, what happens when you flash the car? It's like lightning. So one small thing that I've really loved about this Golf, and it's also common in, I think, in the Audis, is the way the flashlights work. And flashed a flashed a Bugatti Veyron, and put my hazards on, and he put his hazards on, right, and he really showed me what speed is like, and he just disappeared, literally, within, I think, 3 seconds. I just couldn't keep up. I mean, I just couldn't. But I've never seen kind of a Veyron speed off in that kind of manner. It was like kind of a mosquito. It just disappeared. It was fantastic. There was another time I kind of drove against another Golf, which was fun. I thought, oh, what's this small little Yaris doing? And then the guy kind of pulls down his window, and he says, "Hey, pull over." It was an undercover police car, and so this gentleman brings me over and says, "Look," pulls me aside on the highway. One of the things he said, "Look, don't you have a family? Don't you have a mother and sisters? What happens if you got into a car accident? It's not just you. You should be worried about others." And on this occasion, he said, "I'm not going to give you a ticket. Just go." And that for me was the kind of, I think, the biggest slap for me on speeding. I didn't really speed after that. I think that kind of got home the message. If you are going for a DSG option, then it would be really wise to get that checked, because replacing that would be really, really expensive. But otherwise, it's a really solid car. In the 7 years that I've owned it, it never kind of stopped on me. It would start up every day without fail, no problems whatsoever. The dealership was amazing, fantastic service. The craftsmanship behind this car has been absolutely brilliant. So, is it one of the best Golf GTIs ever? In my experience, I think absolutely so. I hope you've enjoyed this. Until then, take care. Goodbye.